Now, Steve, I guess we just opened the conversation up with what makes a good location. I know that's a big, broad question, but how do we start with that, and how do we tackle that?
Yeah, so we had a bit of a chat. Yeah, we had a bit of a chat before this about that. It is a broad question because it's going to come down to like, what are you actually trying to achieve? Like, what's your budget? And like, are you actually trying to get a value add, passive income, capital growth, things like that? Then every asset class is completely different. Like an office space different to a retail, different to an industrial. So the way I kind of answer it is like, normally you'd start off with your budget. So you'll come and go, okay, I've got $1 million. Where can I afford for $1 million? And then that's where you might go, okay, do I want to stick capital cities or do I want to go regional? Then each property is going to have a different nuance. So like, what is better then? Is it a CBD one on a really low yield, a middle ring one on a slightly high yield, an outer ring on a high yield, or go regional? So they're all different factors that you kind of have to take into account. There's no right answer. Like, no one's going to be able to tell you a 7.5% property is worse than, say, a 5% yielding one. You can argue what the net return is going to be, though. So I might argue that, and this is a conversation I have quite often, is I'd much rather go buy like a 6% yielding industrial space in, say, Brisbane than a 7% yielding one in Rockhampton. So even though Rockhampton's got a better yield, and it may even have a longer lease, the vacancy periods are much higher. Like, we're talking 12 months to 36 months, whereas the stuff I buy in Brisbane, we're talking like 1 to 2 months maximum. So that for me alludes, and there's no crystal ball, but that alludes to me that there's going to be better capital growth, better rental increases, and lower periods of vacancy. So your ROI, your return on investment, is actually going to be a bit better. So that's, for me, playing the longer game, that's a better investment. If it's someone who's looking to get a big passive income, cool, go regional, but you need to assess the risks a little bit more.
What would be
I think people even forget that in residential as well. Is like, I'm going, when they're starting out, I'm going just for the, as much as I can in net income, but forget the capital growth side of it as well. So I guess there's sort of two metrics that people should be looking at. Is like, number one, yes, the yield, but also the capital growth.
Yeah. What actually annoys me a little bit with the residential people and the whole argument of like, oh, I'm going positive cash flow versus negative cash flow. Most of the time they're talking like $50 a week's difference. They're finding something that's a 5.2 versus a 4.7. And on like a 500 ml, like, go pack some shelves at Coles on the weekend and you'll actually make up that difference. Like, buy to the fundamentals. Commercial, it's a bit more of an argument though, because like, say a $1 million property and I buy a 4% yielding Sydney one versus a 7% yielding one in like Townsville, Rockhampton, Mount Isa or something like that, it's $30,000 a year difference. So that actually does have to take into account. If I keep that tenant for say 5 years because it is a secure lease, I'm up like $150,000. So it's getting that balance right, where if it does go vacant, I've got that buffer now, whereas you're kind of relying on more the capital growth on the Sydney ones.